I don't want to know all the minutia. I want the one metric that I can look at and say, okay, the business is healthy, and I'm on to my next topic.
What was your journey like to RevOps? How did you get into it? Why RevOps?
Yeah, so RevOps, it was a bit of an accidental arrival in RevOps. So I'd gone to school, quantitative degrees, and was working in a variety of like analyst roles, so FP&A roles, like some market analytics roles, and there was this role in sales ops that we were I was always circling around, partnering with the sales ops team, working with the sales ops team, but never in sales ops. And then I had a business analyst role that kind of bled into a sales ops role that I just super fell in love with sales. Like I loved everything about selling. I loved the selling team. I loved the whole environment of sales. And then as kind of, I think, I don't want to say the industry, but maybe the community of sales ops has kind of expanded their role into a rev ops role, right? So there isn't really sales ops now, it's revenue operations, which I think is fantastic. I just kind of rode that wave of my accidental arrival in sales ops all the way into a rev ops role. And I just absolutely love everything rev ops and want to stay in it. I love it.
Oh, that's perfect. So it was kind of a natural transition for you, and now you don't need to look back because you're super happy in
Yep,
RevOps.
yep, I'm super happy where I am. Yeah, it was definitely like looking back on it, you can kind of see the logical progression to get there.
Mhm.
And at least the story that I've told of my career, like it makes it all make sense. But
Yeah.
in the moment, I had no idea where I was headed, and it just found my way accidentally into RevOps, and couldn't be
No,
happier.
I love that, honestly. I love the fact that it transitioned naturally and you're here now and
Yeah.
yep, you couldn't be happier. So let's dive straight into metrics then. So with the first question, I do want to ask because companies they do differ with the metrics that you choose. So right now, what metrics do you focus on as the core part of the RevOps function?
Yeah. So where I am right now is definitely in a growth kind of mentality as opposed, so it's definitely top line growth as opposed to cost management. It's much more on the growth side. So the metrics we're focusing are really growth related metrics. So what we're looking at is how do we expand? How do we get more? How do we grow? So that can be customer acquisition, that can be expansion within existing accounts. How do we maximize our channel? So all of our metrics are more focused on expansion than they are on maybe some of those more financially minded expense management metrics. Um, so right now, what I want to see is I want to see quality leads coming in. So we have metrics around lead generation. I want to see high conversion rates. So I want leads coming in and I want them converting from MQLs to SQL. Like I want them moving. I want sales getting quality leads. And then I want sales building pipeline on their own. So there's metrics around pipeline building and I want them closing deals. So there's metrics. I don't want to say there's metrics around win rate because I have opinions on win rate metrics,
Right, okay.
which we can talk about, but I don't like to say like I'm really concerned about win rate. But I am really concerned about quota attainment. I want to make sure that our sellers are getting what they need. And then all the way through, right? Because if we're trying to grow, we can't risk the install base we have.
Mhm.
So churn rates, making sure those are as small as possible,
Mhm.
making sure that our spend with an account is growing over time, that we're doing more and more business with them,
Mhm.
not just kind of maintaining.
Ah, okay. So I would actually be super interested to hear about your philosophy when it comes to the different metrics, because you kind of inferred a little bit. Win rate, you're not too keen on, but
Yeah.
pipeline and everything else. So which
Yeah.
one would you choose?
Yeah. So I'm super keen, or I really like metrics. Like the big metrics to me, I think should address two things. Like one, if we can get to the fewest number of metrics that cover the so what, the like what's the one thing I need to know that my business is healthy. And I'm definitely a minimalist in terms to metrics. Like I don't want to know how many phone calls you made and how many emails you sent and how many people you talked to and how long you talked to them. I don't want to know all the minutia. I want the one metric that I can look at and say, okay, the business is healthy and I'm on to my next topic, right? Because everybody only has so many hours in a day. We can't spend all day digging through metrics if we don't need to. So what I really try to focus on is what is the one or two so what metrics for marketing? What are the one or two so what metrics for sales? What are the one or two so what metrics for whatever you want to call the post sales? So account management, customer success, whatever they are in the context. But what are those kind of big high level? I can check them every morning and I know I'll feel like, and as long as they look right, I'll feel okay and we keep going. What are those metrics? And then also, what are the metrics that are leading indicators for me so that I know when to dig in, when I think there's a problem, but I still have time to right the ship, which kind of feeds into my lack of affection for win rate, because I don't know what I would do with that. So like like your win rate is a historical measure. It's already in the past. And if I look at your win rate and say, oh, your win rate is too low, you're not winning enough, what I find is that it creates an incentive to game the metric. And I don't want my sellers to say, well, like my win rate's too low, so I'm not going to enter my opportunities into Salesforce until I'm super confident that I'm going to win them. Because then what happens is your pipeline starts to shrink, but your win rate's skyrocketing. And now we're in this weird game of like manipulating metrics. And I don't want that. So I try to really stay away from win rate as the thing that monitors sellers. And I would much rather focus on quota attainment. So did you make your number? Like, it doesn't really matter if you're making your number. Does it really matter if you win 30% of your opportunities or 50% of your opportunities because you're making your number? So,
No, I love that. I love
yeah.
the part where it said, you're trying to keep it simple and just have a so what metric. And that's why you don't focus on win rate, because, that means, it's more quantity rather than quality. But if you keep it simple with a few metrics,
Right.
it makes it a lot easier. I love that.
I'm a big fan of the so what, and I'm also a big fan of what I have named like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 metrics. I'm sure there's like a better way of classifying these, but it was something I learned early on in my first kind of dabbling in a sales ops role was if you want to measure your sellers and you want to make sure your sellers are doing exactly what you want them to do, then quota attainment is probably the metric that you want to look at. And if they're making their quota, do you really want to go too much deeper? Like maybe you do for benchmarking purposes, but not necessarily for coaching purposes, because they're doing what you wanted them to do. But then underneath that would be like a tier 1. And then underneath that, I view there being like a handful of metrics that feed into your quota attainment. And that can be, it could be your win rate. It could be the size of your pipeline. It could be your deal velocity. Like how fast are you able to get through a sales cycle? How fast do you win? Or lose in that case. And if you're not making your quota, then I want to dig in and look at that next level of metrics for marketing, or the next level for sales, or the next level for customer success. But when the so what metric looks okay, everything else is just kind of, I just want to use it for benchmarking. I want to use it for best practices. I want to use it to provide guardrails and guidance for someone who's not performing at that level. But I don't want to spend a ton of time worrying about that, because
you've got your so what sorted.
I've got my so what sorted. Yeah.
I love that. I think it would be really interesting to hear about how the metrics that you've chosen, how it bridges that great operations versus strategy divide. Like how does the metrics play a part there?
Yeah. So I think when we set things like a go-to-market strategy and we've decided we are going to market either with channel partners or we're going to market through a massive prospecting SDR, BDR engine, if we're going to market that way, if we're going to market through channels, however we're going to do this and execute and go after the market that we've identified, I think that strategy informs the metrics that we're going to monitor. Because if we're going through channels, then I probably don't need to worry too much about what my BDR team is doing for outreach. So I might not be measuring that the way I'm measuring, number of webinars hosted with partners, right? So how many partners have we trained? What are we measuring for our partner community versus our internal prospecting behavior? Because that's not how we're going to market, right? And that's a strategy that informed our metrics, because the strategy drives the so what. By the strategy, I can pick my so what metrics. And then once I have my so what metrics, I can build operational processes and measurements and systems to capture the so what metric and inform my so it's kind of like the metric to me is the thing that connects all the operational processes and tools and systems to my strategy, and I judge that that's working through the metric that kind of connects the two, because the strategy picked the metric and the operations helps me collect the metric, and the metric measures my operations.
Okay, so there's not much divide in your function, in your world anyways, because you mesh them together.
I mush them together, honestly. And I think RevOps is this unique function and role that just doesn't get clear divides on really anything, right? So like RevOps easily bleeds into the strategic function, and it bleeds into obviously operations, but it bleeds into technology, and then it just kind of operates in this very gray bordered of all the departments around it, right? So where does finance end and RevOps stop? Where does sales end? Like, where does sales management stop and RevOps start? So to me, like, it always just kind of all smushes itself together in that RevOps function, because it's strategic, it's operational, it's cross-functional. It's just all the metrics kind of flow into that space.
That makes sense. I think what would be really interesting is to hear about how you feel like with your metrics. How do you know when it's successful? Because everything mushes together. How do you know what metrics work?
Right. So that's a hard question sometimes, I think. And this is where some of my struggle with win rate, for example, comes, because what is success, right? Like, what's the number that I need to get to? And that's why I think having those so what metrics and using your so what metrics to kind of check and balance yourself, right? So if marketing's being measured on number of leads that come out, because that's at the end of the day, that's what we want marketing to do, is produce a lot of leads. So if marketing is producing a lot of leads, then I want there to be a metric that measures not just the quantity, but the quality. And I need those two to kind of check and balance themselves. And then if sales is closing a lot of deals, that's awesome. But if the strategy was land and expand, and we're not seeing the expand, I need the metric to measure the expand. You can never get kind of to one. You need them to all kind of check and balance. And then success is when I can look across it and see, okay, I have a number of leads coming in that provides me with a manageable amount to work, and the reps are able to close an appropriate amount of that, and what they're closing is set up to execute on our longer term strategy. It'd be that land and expand, or if it's just kind of get everything up front, whatever our plan is with them and the growth plan going forward for them. I think having that kind of metric that follows along a customer journey, and it lets RevOps see at each point we have gates that we're getting through. And success is when you go all the way from the beginning all the way to the end, and you see like progress the whole way through. So I don't ever think that there's like a number to get to. Like I wouldn't say, well, I need my win rate to be 35%. And if I'm not at 35%, then I'm not winning enough, because there's too many factors that would have to be controlled, right? Because say I want a 35% win rate, well, I can get to a 35% win rate simply by lowering the number of opportunities coming into the pipeline, or raising the number of opportunities coming in until I get to that. Like you can kind of game it. So I don't ever think there's like this magic number of like X, like that's the benchmark. It varies way too much. And I think it's seeing a handful of metrics that fit together to tell a story or indicate that what's going on across the life cycle is actually supporting or driving the strategy that you've set forth.
Okay. So with your so what metrics, right? Do you feel like there has been any metrics that you've chosen and it just didn't work very well and you had to abort mission and change it? Like, have you had any mistakes like that so far?
Oh yeah. I've had tons of mistakes. Win rate is probably one that, like, early on, you know, win rate, it just, because it just on the surface sounds like it should make sense. So you're like, well, I care about win rate, and you don't win enough. So win rate was definitely one that I learned to abandon. I've also seen things like vanity metrics, where you're measuring things simply to make yourself feel really good about what you've done. So you start putting out metrics to say, see, look how much I've produced, or see, look at this. And you fall into this trap of telling a story that's like amazing, right? So look at all the MQLs I've produced, right, from marketing. And you say, look, we did this campaign and we got all these MQLs, and isn't this wonderful? And then you kind of play that forward and you say, okay, well, if I created all these MQLs, then next year I should be responsible for X% of the pipeline. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't know if I want to sign up for this type of contribution going forward forever. So I've definitely learned some of the challenges of identifying metrics that make you look or feel really good, or make a department look or feel really good. And then later found the ramifications of doing that. Like MQLs are one, right? So if everything's an MQL, if every lead came from marketing and sales doesn't do any prospecting, then next year marketing should produce the whole pipeline. And I don't think any marketing department wants to sign up for that. And in RevOps, I surely don't want to say everything comes from marketing, or everything comes from a channel, or everything comes, from self-sourced from sales. You want to see it spread out, and you want that to be realistic. So those kind of vanity metrics, I think, are a pitfall where you run into trouble. And then also, I guess the third kind of bucket of things is sometimes these metrics of convenience. So there's things you can measure because they're so easy to measure. So the tools now, like Salesforce has tools like this, Outreach can do it. I mean, almost everything can do this, where they can track the number of emails you sent and the response rate and how many people opened them and how many, and you fall down this kind of rabbit hole of, well, I can monitor how many emails my rep sends every single day and what time they do their emails. And you fall down that hole of that, and then you've completely lost sight of the so what, because well, okay, your rep sent 600 emails last week, but now what? Like, what do I do with that information? So I think that those are really dangerous metrics too, because like on one hand, it's so exciting to find the data, to say, look at all this data and look at all this information, and I must be better off because I can measure everything and anything, and I have to be better off having this information than I was when I didn't have that information. But then when you actually start digging in, what you've done is you've kind of distracted yourself. You've lost sight of the strategy. You've lost sight of the so what.
Yeah.
And now you're in this mess of Excel spreadsheets trying to find your way back out and get back to that so what. And I think early on in a career, that's a really dangerous pitfall where people land, because you want to show all the metrics. I did, at least. I wanted to show everything I could calculate and look at all this data and look at all the ways I can combine the data. But then I couldn't get to well, what do I do with that now?
Yeah.
So,
it's like choosing a metric for the sake of choosing the metric.
Right. Just because it's convenient and available. Yeah.
I love your awareness of the fact that, you know, you can potentially go a bit too far with the metrics that you choose, and you need to be quite flexible, seeing the bigger picture of what's actually going on. So it's really cool. So last question for you, Jessica, which is, you know, if you was in a room full of revenue leaders in RevOps, what would you ask them?
Oh, so I think you sent over the questions you sent previous to this, I was on the phone with another RevOps person, and I was like, which one would you pick? Like, which one would you pick? And we were both saying how fascinating and challenging, which is why I didn't pick it, because I just don't feel qualified to give advice on it, was how do you move the B players to the A players and the A players to, you know, best in class. And we were just saying that if there was a clear answer to that, like if somebody could show me the 3 metrics to make the 3 things I have to measure to make my B players A players, like where's the disconnect between my B and my A? And that's something that has kept me up at night for years, because I have all the metrics. I know what my A players look like on paper, and I know what players look like on paper. And you want to tell yourself, if I could just get them to hit, you know, 15 emails a day instead of 12 emails a day, they would become A players. And they don't. And it, like, that to me that would be a fascinating conversation in a room full of RevOps, because if somebody knew the answer to that one and could like give you an answer that would consistently work cross industry, cross company, cross every kind of border, that would be like absolutely amazing.
Yeah. No, I get that. This is exactly why we have the community, because you're in such a hard but fulfilling position where you don't have any rule books, you don't have specific metrics that you have to follow, and it's going to upskill your reps. So I like the question.
Yeah, that question is amazing.